My name is Danielle. When I was growing up, I was really close to my older sister, Tori. But then she went to college in Switzerland, and I barely heard from her. Because she was living abroad, the only way we could communicate was through WhatsApp. None of my friends in America had WhatsApp, so I only used it for Tori. I thought it was going to be a temporary thing until she graduated, but then she decided to stay in Europe. She became an ESL teacher, working in Romania, and then Poland, and then Greece. She loved her life and had no intention of moving back to America. I barely left my hometown and just didn't understand my sister's wanderlust. Over time, we slowly grew apart. We still messaged each other, but our voice calls became less and less frequent. We simply didn't have anything to talk about anymore. Just over a year ago, she messaged me that she had decided to move to Moldova, which was a tiny country in Eastern Europe that I'd never heard of before. I checked the American Embassy website, and it seemed like a pretty dangerous place for foreigners. Unlike the other countries she'd been to, Moldova had a bunch of travel warnings for America. For the first time, I got a little nervous about my sister's travels. I tried to call her to talk her out of the move, but she wouldn't answer. So I texted her a long WhatsApp message explaining that I missed her and that I was really worried. She sent me a one-sentence response: "Don't meddle with my life." After that, I didn't hear from her for months. I sent her occasional messages to check in, but she never responded. And then, about 3 months ago, she finally wrote me back. She sounded surprisingly friendly, as if the last few months of radio silence had never happened. She told me about how great her life was. She talked about her job and her new friends. I was so happy that she'd gotten over her anger. It seemed like she missed me just as much as I'd missed her. I tried to do a voice call, but she said that the Wi-Fi was so bad in Moldova that the calls wouldn't go through. So we stuck to texting. For the next few weeks, Tori and I texted back and forth almost constantly. I had never felt so close to her. She was telling me all sorts of wild stories, and she made Moldova seem like a very fun place. Then one day, she forwarded me a plane ticket to come visit her. She said that she wanted me to stay at her place for 2 weeks, and she'd pay for everything. Even though I had my passport, I'd never left the country before. I just didn't really have the desire to travel, and even though Tori seemed happy in Moldova, I wasn't sure that I wanted to go. But over WhatsApp, Tori kept pressuring me. She sent me photos of all the places that she'd take me to. I knew I needed to reconnect with my sister, so I ignored my nervousness and agreed to go. I took 2 weeks off from work and checked all the visa requirements. It's different now, but back then, Americans visiting Moldova could get a visa on arrival if their stay was under 30 days. There was nothing I needed to do besides pack. In early June, I flew to Chisinau, the capital city. It was a small, grimy airport, and the immigration guy seemed surprised that I was traveling there alone. In broken English, he asked me a few questions about my reasons for traveling. I told him that I was going to be staying with my sister the entire time I was there. He gave me a long look and said, "Good luck. Be safe." After that, I messaged Tori that I'd arrived. Before, she told me that she'd meet me at the airport, but now her response was, "Great, my friend Vlad will pick you up." Then she sent me a photo of Vlad's beat-up Soviet-era car, which was already waiting for me in the parking lot. This made me nervous. I tried to call Tori directly, surprised by how fast the Wi-Fi was at the airport. From what Tori had said, the whole country had spotty Wi-Fi. But that didn't seem right. Everyone I saw in the airport had smartphones, and most people were scrolling through their phones without any problem. Tori didn't answer my call. She just texted me to find Vlad. She said I could trust him. So I walked through the parking lot until I found the right car. Vlad was waiting in the driver's seat. I couldn't see him clearly, but he looked short and greasy. He smiled at me when I approached, and I instantly distrusted him. I thought about turning around and going back to the airport, but I knew that was overreacting. Vlad stepped out of his car and shoved my luggage in the trunk. Then he told me to get in the passenger seat. He didn't even say hello. I got in, and we drove out of the parking lot in silence. He kept glancing over at me, but he wouldn't say anything. I tried to ask him some questions, but he just smiled and laughed. I figured he didn't speak English. We drove through the city for much longer than I'd expected. Eventually, the buildings began to thin out, and I realized that he was taking me to the countryside. My heart pounded in my chest. I tried to call my sister again. At first, she didn't answer. Then I heard a phone ringing in the glove compartment. Horrified, I realized that Tori's phone was in Vlad's car the whole time. I glanced over at him and he ignored me. I could feel the car speed up. I opened the glove compartment and found Tori's ringing phone. "It took you long enough to figure it out," Vlad said in perfect English. "What's going on?" As he drove faster and faster into the countryside, he told me that he had special plans for me, just like my sister. I didn't understand what was going on. Where was he taking me? What had he done to Tori? I had so many questions. I asked him, "How long have you had my sister's phone?" "Since the day she arrived," he said. I let those words sink in. All this time I wasn't texting Tori. I was texting this psycho pretending to be Tori. "Where is she?" I demanded. "You'll find out soon enough." We were on a long straight highway with empty fields on either side. We hadn't passed another building in miles. I knew I had to find a way to escape. In a panic, I did the only thing I could think of. While he was still driving, I yanked on the parking brake. The car slowed down a bit, but not by a lot. Then I opened the door and jumped out. My body slammed against the dirt ground, gravel and rocks tearing into my skin. I knew my arm was broken. One of my legs probably was too. I'd never felt more intense pain, but at least I was out of Vlad's car. I saw the car slow down and then make a U-turn. He was coming back to get me. But as he turned, another car was driving in the opposite lane. With my left arm, the one that wasn't broken, I waved for help. The car slammed to a stop right next to me and a large hairy man rushed out of the driver's seat to see if I was okay. As soon as he got out, Vlad's car turned back around and sped away. The man talked to me in a language I didn't understand and then carried me into his back seat. He drove me back toward a hospital in the city. After the doctor sewed me up and gave me a cast, the local police came to ask me what had happened. I told them the whole story, and they didn't look surprised. I guess this kind of thing happened a lot in Moldova. "You're very lucky," one policeman told me, even though I had 4 broken bones and needed a skin graft. "Will you look for my sister?" I asked him. "We'll try," he said. "But I don't think she's still alive." I spent weeks recovering in the hospital, overstaying my visa and having to pay a bunch of fines. I'm back home now, feeling a lot better, but still having to use a cane. I know that Tori is gone forever. I miss her so much, and the worst part is, I still don't know what Vlad had done to her. My name is Terry. I've worked for the same company for 8 years. I liked my job, and I was very good at it, but I hated how all my male coworkers kept getting promoted over me. I ended up working under several men who had much less talent and experience than me. Charles, my immediate boss, had only worked for the company for 2 years. I was the one who trained him. And now he was calling all the shots, even though he didn't know what he was doing. Last spring, Charles announced that our whole department was going to an important conference in Florida. I was excited to go, but then he pulled me aside and said that there weren't enough rooms at the resort they were staying at. Everyone had to share rooms, and since I was the only female on the staff, he thought it would be simpler for everyone if I sat this one out. Those were his exact words. Sat this one out? I can't tell you how furious I was. Normally, I didn't stand up for myself whenever Charles did anything sexist or unfair. I think that's what he was counting on. But this was my final straw. So I asked him if the room situation was the only reason I wasn't invited. He said yes. So I told him that I'd book a nearby Airbnb for myself and attend the conference anyway. He tried to argue with me, but he couldn't think of any good reasons to tell me no, so he reluctantly gave me the conference information. I was lucky enough to find an Airbnb literally next door to the resort. It was more expensive than I wanted, but I knew the extra money would be worth it. I'd get to attend all the meetings and do all the networking stuff, and then I'd go back to the privacy of my own little house. If everything worked out, I'd impress our clients and make everyone see what a mistake Charles was making by trying to alienate me. After I checked in and unpacked, I grabbed my bag of work materials and swim clothes, and I walked over to the resort. Charles must have warned the concierge about me, because the guy glared at me as I entered. I introduced myself and he handed me the itinerary. I politely thanked him and left. But when I looked at the itinerary, I saw that there were barely any scheduled meetings at all. Instead, there were items like relaxation time, golf break, and pool session. I saw a couple of my coworkers walking through the lobby, but when I approached them, they hurried off in the other direction. It seemed like no one wanted me there. I thought about just giving up and leaving early, but I knew that if I left now, I'd always regret it. So I walked straight to the breakfast buffet and acted like I was meant to be there. I saw Charles and a few of our coworkers getting their food, but they didn't notice me. "Terry?" someone shouted behind me. I turned around and saw Mr. Jenkins, one of our company's CEOs. I'd never really talked to him face to face before, but we had corresponded through emails periodically, and I knew that he liked my work. I walked over and sat at his table. "Charles said you couldn't make it," he said. "I'm glad you're here." "Me too," I said. As he picked at his food, I filled him in on all the projects I'd been working on. He seemed really impressed. For the first time, I felt like this trip was finally worth it. I could impress him. Then it didn't matter what other obstacles Charles threw in my way. While we were deep into our conversation, I saw Charles and his buddies glaring at me from another table. I smiled back at him. Then Mr. Jenkins asked me about the Heartache Initiative, a very ambitious new project that I had planned for the next quarter. I was surprised that he'd even heard of it. I filled him in on the specifics and he said, "Sounds amazing. I can't wait to hear the presentation." I wasn't planning on presenting it at the conference, but I'd be more than happy to. I had all my notes with me. When breakfast was over, Mr. Jenkins said he looked forward to seeing me at our noon meeting. Then he left. I looked down at my itinerary and saw that we didn't have a noon meeting. Either Mr. Jenkins was wrong, or, more likely, Charles had purposely given me the wrong information. I had to find out. I walked over to Charles, ready to ask him about the schedule, but he didn't give me the chance. Instead, he acted weirdly friendly. He complimented my outfit and told me how happy he was to see me. I knew he was lying. "You know what you should do?" he asked. "Try out the saunas behind the pool. You'll love it. Come with me and I'll show you." He grabbed my arm and started guiding me toward the pool. He was still pretending to be friendly, but he gripped my arm pretty tightly. He took me to the small building with 2 individual sauna rooms. One of them had an out-of-order sign, but the other was open. "Go inside, you'll love it. We don't have any meetings until tomorrow, so now's the perfect time." Once again, he was lying. He practically pushed me into the sauna. "But I'm not wearing the right clothes," I said. "You can change inside, trust me." And with that, he pushed me into the sauna and pulled the door closed behind me. I tried to open the door, but the lock was jammed. I slammed my body into it, but nothing happened. I was trapped inside. Through the door, Charles said, "You brought this on yourself, you know." Then I heard him walk away. I kept slamming into the door, but it refused to open. Charles had locked me inside. That's when I figured out what he was doing. Charles didn't want me to go to the noon meeting because he was going to make a presentation on the Heartache Initiative. He was going to steal my ideas and claim them as his own. By the time someone found me and let me out of the sauna, it would be too late. I reached into my bag to get my phone, but it was gone. Charles must have taken it while we were walking. Then I felt sweat ooze down my face. The room was heating up. Charles had turned on the sauna before he left. He wasn't trying to keep me from the meeting. He was trying to kill me. Unless someone found me soon, I'd dehydrate. I'd die. And when people finally found my body, they'd think that it was some tragic accident. I looked around the sauna for anything I could use to pry open the door. I couldn't find anything. Soon the heat was unbearable. It was so hot, I could barely breathe. Without my phone, I didn't know how long I was trapped inside, but it felt like forever. I kept beating at the door, praying that someone would hear me, but I was losing strength. Eventually, everything turned black and I passed out. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground just outside of the sauna. The hotel's concierge was shaking my shoulders, trying to wake me up. "Water," I mumbled. The man grabbed a water bottle and poured it into my mouth. I drank the whole thing in seconds. He asked me what happened, and I told him that my boss had locked me inside. The man's eyes widened. You mean he tried to kill you? Apparently. Well, thank God I found you in time. Let me help you up and I'll take you to the medic. Wait, I said. My strength was quickly returning. I pointed up toward the security camera in the corner of the ceiling. I hadn't noticed it before. Does that camera work? The man glanced up. Yeah, I think so. Good. Less than an hour later, our new meeting started. As I expected, Charles stood in front of Mr. Jenkins and all our coworkers and clients to make a presentation on the Hardick Initiative. I watched him from just outside the door as he took credit for all my work. I didn't interrupt him, though. I had another plan. Then, after Charles had made his introduction, he switched on the projector. Instead of showing slides, though, a video popped up on the screen behind him. It was the security camera footage of when he locked me in the sauna. The whole audience gasped as they saw Charles jam the lock and turn on the sauna to its hottest setting. That was when I walked into the room, still wet and red. Without saying a word, I stepped onto the stage and took the microphone from Charles's hand. As he stared at me in horror, I finished the presentation myself. The room erupted in chaos. Mr. Jenkins' face turned an alarming shade of purple, and shouts of betrayal echoed through the hall. Charles, frozen in a deer-in-the-headlights stupor, looked like he might faint. Security escorted him out, his protests drowned out by the angry murmurs of the crowd. I, however, wasn't done. The near-death experience had ignited a cold, dark fire within me. Over the next few weeks, I anonymously leaked evidence of Charles's past transgressions, incidents of harassment and discrimination he'd managed to keep under wraps. His career unraveled faster than a dropped sweater. He was fired, blacklisted, and forced to move back in with his disapproving mother in a dingy basement apartment. 1 year later, one particularly gloomy afternoon, a knock rattled the thin metal door. Charles stood there, a ragged shadow of his former self. He begged for forgiveness, for a chance to explain. I let him in, a cruel smile twisting my lips. Over lukewarm instant coffee, I listened to his sob story. He blamed the pressure, the competition, a misplaced sense of entitlement. As he droned on, I saw a flicker of something dark in his eyes. Not remorse, but a chilling spark of recognition. He understood the game now, the brutal power dynamics. When he finished, I leaned in close and whispered, "Get the hell out." When I moved abroad, I couldn't call my mom, so I convinced her to download WhatsApp so we could message each other whenever we wanted. She didn't know technology very well, so I had to help her set everything up before I left. I had to explain things over and over before she felt comfortable. Then I flew to my new place in Italy and sent Mom a text that I had arrived. She responded with a heart emoji. After that, Mom and I messaged each other pretty constantly. It was weird, but even though we were on the other side of the world, I felt closer to her than ever. We talked more on WhatsApp than we ever had when we were living in the same town. I told her all about my new job and my new house, and she filled me in on all the crazy things going on back home. She told me about her karaoke night and the dates she went on, and her new yoga class. She sounded like a completely different person. I guess she was waiting for me to finally move out of the house before she started having a social life of her own. I was so proud of her. About 3 weeks after I'd moved, Mom sent me a really strange message. "Do you know someone named Joe?" It was a really common name, but I couldn't think of any specific Joes that I was close with, so I told her no. She explained that she'd made a new friend on WhatsApp named Joe who said that he was one of my college friends. She said he seemed really nice. My heart sank. She was being scammed. I asked her if she had a photo of this person, and she sent me a photo of a very handsome blonde man. I'd never seen him before. I instantly did a reverse image search on Google, and sure enough, the photo was made by AI. Joe was not a real person. I tried to call Mom to explain everything directly, but she didn't answer. She texted me that she didn't know how to receive calls on WhatsApp, even though I'd already shown her how. So I was just stuck to texting. I told her that Joe was a scammer and she should block him. Her response was, "I don't know how to block people, and I don't think he's a scammer. He seems so nice." My mom is an amazing person, but I'd always been worried that she'd fall for some internet scam. She was too trusting, and her lack of computer skills made her particularly vulnerable. I kept trying to warn her about Joe, but she wouldn't listen. I eventually gave up and messaged my cousins, asking them to visit Mom and talk some sense into her. They said they would, but then I never heard anything back. The next day, Mom messaged me again. She said that Joe had asked her for some money to help with his hospital bills. Again, I told her to stop talking with him, but she said it was too late. She already sent him $2,000. I can't tell you how frustrated I was. I called up my uncle, who also lived in my hometown, and told him the situation. He said he'd go over and talk to her. He called me back an hour later saying that Mom denied everything, pretending that she had no idea what he was talking about. There was nothing I could do to save Mom from this scammer. She wouldn't listen to me, and she denied everything to my uncle's face. I just hoped that the guy would leave her alone now that he got his money. Unfortunately, that wasn't what happened. Mom messaged me in the middle of the night saying that she was going to visit Joe at the hospital to see if he was okay after his operation. "Don't go," I wrote in all caps. She didn't respond after that. Then an hour later, after I'd gone back to sleep, she messaged me again. "He wasn't at the hospital." She added a sad face emoji. "Because he's not real," I told her. I hoped that this would finally make her come to her senses, but she responded back, "No, I just messaged him. He said the doctors let him out early." I was so frustrated that I turned off my phone. If Mom was going to allow herself to keep getting scammed, then I was just going to stay out of it. Nothing I could say would make her change her mind. I didn't hear from her for the next few days. I was worried, but I asked my cousins to check in on her. They said that Mom was fine. She was at home watching TV. That made me feel at least a little better. The next night, Mom finally messaged me again. "I haven't heard from you. Is everything okay?" I told her I was fine. I didn't mention Joe. Then she wrote, "Good. I'm finally meeting Joe tomorrow. I'll take photos when I see him to prove that he's real." I told her not to go. I begged her. I wrote a long emotional message explaining how much she meant to me and how she was putting herself in danger. She didn't respond. The next day was the start of my 1-week vacation from my new job. There was some kind of festival in Italy, and I planned to spend the week exploring my new town. But with my mom acting so crazy, I knew I had to fly back there and finally sort everything out. I got the first available flight, which was surprisingly cheap because it was so last minute, and I flew all the way back to America. The entire flight, I was furious that I had to sacrifice my own vacation to save my mother from her own stupidity. The plane landed in the afternoon, and I texted my mom to see where she was. She sent me an address. "Is this where you're meeting Joe?" I asked. "Yep," she wrote back. "Already here. I'm just waiting for him." "Go home," I wrote. She didn't respond. I ordered an Uber and gave him the address. We drove for half an hour until we ended up at an old warehouse on the edge of the city. It looked like the sketchiest place ever. I asked the Uber driver to wait there, and then I ran out of the car to look for Mom. I saw a black truck parked in the back, but I didn't see Mom's car. I messaged her, asking if she was still there. I instantly got a reply. "I have your mother. If you give me $10,000, I'll let her go." My heart was racing. I didn't see anyone outside, so I had to go into the warehouse. I took a deep breath and ran in. A man was waiting for me. He was short but very muscular. "Right on time," he said, and grabbed me. As he held me down, 3 other men came out of the shadows and took my phone and wallet. I demanded to know where my mom was. The man laughed. "How am I supposed to know? You've been talking to me the whole time." I didn't understand at first, and then as the men started to tie me up, I realized what a mistake I'd made. All along, the WhatsApp messages weren't coming from my mom. They'd all been from a scammer posing as my mom and somehow using her number. I thought that she was being scammed, but it was actually me. I felt so stupid, and now I had no idea what they were going to do to me. The Uber driver honked his horn outside. All the men froze. "You brought someone with you?" the short man asked. "Yes," I said. "If you don't let me go, he'll stop you." One of the men looked through the dusty warehouse window and said, "Looks like the guy's driving away." I felt like screaming, but I couldn't. They'd shoved a dirty rag into my mouth. They kept me tied up, stole everything I had, and used my phone to drain my bank account. Then they chloroformed me. When I woke up, I was no longer tied up. All my stuff was gone. I walked back to the road and hitchhiked all the way back to my mom's place. She was shocked to see me. I told her what happened and she said, "See, that's why I didn't want to use WhatsApp. Too many scammers." The night was dark and the streets were deserted as I pulled up to the traffic light, waiting for the light to change. My mind was occupied with thoughts of the long workday, barely noticing the figure approaching my car window. "Excuse me, sir, spare some change?" The voice was almost a whisper, but it jolted me out of my reverie. I turned to see a disheveled man, his eyes pleading as he extended a weathered hand. Instinctively, I reached for my wallet, ready to offer some assistance, but as I patted around to figure out which pocket my wallet was in, I felt a pang of unease. I was barely able to pay my bills, and I had just checked my bank account to make sure I had enough to buy toilet paper. On top of that, there was something about this situation and the panhandler that didn't sit right with me. "I'm sorry, I don't have any cash on me," I said, my voice faltering slightly. The man's eyes narrowed, his expression darkened. "Come on, man, just a few bucks, I'm desperate here," he pleaded, his tone growing more insistent. Before I could respond, the light changed, and I hastily rolled up my window, eager to escape the uncomfortable encounter. I mouthed sorry to him as I turned left into the Walmart parking lot. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes boring into the back of my head. I pulled into a parking spot and got out of my car. The lights in the parking lot flickered. I was still thinking of that weathered man. I felt bad I couldn't give him anything, but times were tough. I was only at Walmart to get toilet paper, but I also grabbed a $5 bath bomb for my wife. I couldn't afford flowers, but she would love a bath bomb just as much. Before I headed to the checkout, I got a text from my wife. "Can you grab a pizza or lasagna for dinner? It was a long day and I don't want to cook." I responded, "For you, anything. Any particular pizza sound good?" She told me to get whatever I wanted because she only cared about having an easy dinner. I strolled over to the frozen pizza aisle and assessed all my options. Was I in a thick or thin crust mood? What toppings? I took my time deciding before I landed on a boring pepperoni pizza. I headed to the self-checkout, swiped my card, and headed back out to my car. The closer I got to the car, the stronger the smell of cigarettes became. I looked around to see if someone was smoking, but I was the only one in the parking lot. When I reached my car, there was a foul stench. It smelled dirty. Again, I looked around to see where the smell came from, but I was the only one in the parking lot. I threw the toilet paper in the trunk and approached the door. When I opened it, I realized I had forgotten to lock it. My mind was so wrapped up thinking about the panhandler, I forgot to hit the lock button. My heart skipped a beat, but relief washed over me when I remembered that I had nothing of value in my car. So, there was nothing someone would want to steal. I got in my car and the foul odor increased tenfold. "Jesus Christ," I said out loud. I plugged my nose and held my breath. "I should have gotten car fresheners." I rolled the windows down on my way home, which helped, but I still held my breath at intervals. When I pulled into the garage, all the lights in my home were on. My wife beat me home. I crawled out of my car and got the toilet paper from the back and went inside. My wife was drinking a cup of wine, waiting for me. She greeted me with a smile. "What kind of pizza did you get?" I showed her the pepperoni pizza. "Can't go wrong with pepperoni," she said. "That's what I thought," I responded. And one more thing. I pulled out the bath bomb and her face lit up. She ran over to me but recoiled. "What is that smell?" she asked. "Did you smoke a cigarette?" "No, but I think someone was smoking one when I left Walmart." I sniffed my shirt. "I don't mean to be mean, but can you change and take a quick shower? You reek. I can get the pizza started." I obliged. As we ate, she told me all about this one troubled coworker she has who never does any work. I love her, but she can ramble. She went on, and my mind wandered back to the panhandler. I'm unsure why the thought wandered into my head, but I wondered how long it would have taken him to walk to the Walmart parking lot. Could he have been the source of the smell? Did he rummage through my car to see if there was anything to steal? Except my car didn't look like anyone had gone through it. I thought of that old urban legend about a villain sneaking into the back of an unsuspecting individual's car. When the person leaves and when they're far enough away, the villain reveals himself and kills the driver. Could the panhandler have snuck into my car to hitch a ride home? I told my wife my thought process, and she thought maybe I should take an anxiety pill. It sounded like my mind was running wild with these thoughts. That story is just an urban legend. Still, I checked my car. I drive an SUV, so he could have sat all the way in the back and I wouldn't have seen him. I went out to my car and the garage was filled with that nasty odor. I plugged my nose and inspected my car. No one was in it. With that, my wife and I went to bed. Later that night, the same stench crawled back up my nose while I slept. When I woke, I felt like I was in a cloud of that smell, which also woke my wife up. "What is that? Did a pipe break?" my wife inquired. I heard something shuffle by her closet. I squinted my eyes to try and make out what was in the dark, and I saw a figure. It was like a night terror where a shadowy silhouette was coming towards you, but you couldn't move or scream. But this shadow remained where it was. Dread filled my body. My wife grabbed my hand. "Honey, do you see that?" She turned on the light. The room illuminated, revealing the panhandler standing by our closet, breathing heavily, his face twisted in a sinister grin. "Thought you could ignore me, huh?" he sneered, advancing towards us with a menacing intent. I didn't wait for him to make the first move. Under the bed, I kept a steel baseball bat just in case something like this happens. I jumped out of bed and grabbed it. With a cry of fear and desperation, I swung the bat with all my might. The sound of the metal hitting the panhandler's head echoed through the room. My wife screamed. Like a tree, he fell to the floor. I called the authorities so they would take him away. I wasn't charged for anything on account of self-defense.
Last month, I was supposed to go camping with my cousin Frank, but I'd gotten into a fight with my girlfriend Trudy, and I had to cancel on him. I expected him to reschedule for the next weekend, but instead, he decided to go alone. I tried to tell him that it was a bad idea. He didn't know the area as well as I did, but he wouldn't listen. I think he was mad at me for bailing on him, especially because he never liked Trudy at all. So he left Saturday morning, and I was hoping to hear from him when he got there, but he never texted. I tried calling him a couple times, but he didn't respond. I thought that maybe he couldn't get reception up in the mountains, but I knew that wasn't true. I'd been up there plenty of times before, and I'd always been able to make calls. By Sunday, I was getting pretty nervous. I called the police to report him missing, but when I explained everything, they told me that I was being paranoid, because I mentioned the argument that we had beforehand. They just assumed that Frank didn't want to answer my calls. Frustrated, I decided to drive up to the campgrounds myself and try to find him. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I parked near the ranger station and saw a couple of other cars in the lot. I was about to head up the trail when I realized that one of the cars was familiar. It was Trudy's. Why was my girlfriend's car here? Confused, I decided to call her. She answered immediately. "Trudy, where are you right now?" "On a walk," she said. Clearly, she was hiding something from me. "Hey, do know where Frank is? Your cousin? No? Then I heard a noise in the background. Sorry, gotta go. And she hung up on me. I went into the ranger station to see if anyone had seen Frank or Trudy, but the place was empty. Just in case, I left a note and then headed back to the trail. The campgrounds were pretty big, so I wasn't sure I was going in the right direction, but I kept walking. I passed a few empty cabins and a small stream. I recognized the area well enough, so I knew I wasn't going to get lost. I continued towards the area where Frank and I had gone camping before, and sure enough, I saw his tent, backpack, and a pair of sneakers. I knew this was his stuff because he decorated his backpack with stickers from his favorite rock bands. He wasn't there, though. I went through his backpack just in case, but it was mostly empty. Just a few packages of chips and water. By then, I was really nervous. I searched around their campsite and I couldn't find anything. Just in case, I called Frank again. This time, I heard his phone ringing in the distance. Filled with hope, I raced towards the sound. I ended up in a patch of forest that I'd never seen before. The ringing stopped. I started to call him again when someone walked out of the woods. It wasn't Frank. It was Trudy. "What are you doing here?" I asked her. She took a deep breath and then explained that she'd come here to see Frank. She admitted that she was sleeping with him since last month, ever since we'd started fighting. "You cheated on me? With Frank?" I asked. She nodded. But he felt really guilty about it, so he left me last night. I haven't seen him since, and I think he got lost. She held up the phone in her hands. He left his phone behind too. I couldn't tell if she was lying to me. I always assumed that she and Frank hated each other, but maybe that was just an act. "Why didn't you tell me this when I called you?" "Because I was ashamed. I'm so sorry." I was angry, of course, but mostly I was scared. Even though Frank betrayed me, I didn't want anything bad to happen to him. "I've been looking for him all morning," Trudy added. "Do you want me to help?" "Okay, fine." Together, we continued walking through the forest. She pointed towards all the areas that she already looked. I followed her lead. She took me deeper and deeper into the forest. We didn't say much to each other. Eventually, we made it to a cliff overlooking the valley. If Frank had walked here at night, he might have fallen over the edge. I was filled with dread. Trudy reached the cliff first. She looked over the edge and gasped. "Oh no!" I joined her. Looking down, I saw Frank's body lying dead on the ground. Trudy started to cry. "This is all my fault. I should have stopped him. He said he was going back to his car, but I guess he got turned around." Something wasn't making sense. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but then I looked closer at Frank's body. "You said he was trying to get back to his car?" "Yeah." "Then why is he not wearing any shoes?" Trudy started to smile. "Because I lied. I threw him down there." "What?" Before I could react, she grabbed my arms and started shoving me towards the cliff. She was still smiling. I'm bigger and stronger than Judy, but she'd taken me by surprise. Before I knew it, she had me hanging over the edge. I couldn't stop her. "Why?" I yelled. "Steve, I think we should see other people." Then she threw me off the cliff. I remember falling all the way down, but I don't remember landing. I guess I passed out from the pain. I don't know how long I was unconscious, but eventually I was able to open my eyes. Both my legs were throbbing in pain, obviously broken. The side of my face was scratched and bleeding, but I was alive. I turned my head and saw Frank's body just a few feet away. He wasn't so lucky. His head was twisted unnaturally to the side. With effort, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. I ended up talking to the same dispatcher who talked to me before. "Remember me? The guy you said was being paranoid? Well, my cousin's dead, and I'm badly hurt." I told her my location and she contacted the Rangers. I'm at the hospital now, with casts on both my legs. The doctor said I'm most likely going to make a full recovery. The police are still looking for Trudy. When they do, I'll finally find out why she snapped.
I've never used Airbnb before. I always thought it wasn't worth the price, instead of opting for youth hostels and cheap motels whenever I wanted to travel. But then I had to go to Albuquerque for a little over the month, and I couldn't find any hostels in the area. I finally checked out the Airbnb website, and I found the perfect place. It was like a commune for creative writers and digital nomads. It had a shared workspace, plus some nice amenities like a pool and a gym. I'd have my own private room, but I'd also get to meet other young travelers. And the best part was, the place was well within my price range. So I booked the room and then flew down to Albuquerque. I decided to just use Uber wherever I went instead of renting a car. Ryan, my Airbnb host, assured me that everything was walkable for my new place. Honestly, I was very excited. I took an Uber from the airport to the address that Ryan had sent me. As I rode there, I realized that the location wasn't as walkable as Ryan had insisted. The driver took me far out of the city into an empty neighborhood in the middle of nowhere. There was absolutely nothing nearby. No stores, no restaurants, just a few private houses and a lot of empty land. My driver dropped me off, asking if I was going to be okay here. I thought that was a weird thing for an Uber driver to say. I told him I was fine, and then punched Ryan's code into the gate. Dragging my luggage behind me, I walked around the premises. The commune looked pretty accurate to the photos I'd seen, but there was a really creepy vibe to the whole place. I didn't see a single other person there. I walked through the main building where they had the shared workspace. It was spacious and decorated beautifully, but it too was completely empty. I followed the directions on my phone to Ryan's private room in the back of the complex. He was supposed to meet me there in person, but instead, he left me a note taped to the door. "It's unlocked. Keys are inside. Enjoy your stay." Disappointed, I pushed open the door and put my luggage on the counter. The room was exactly as he had described, but I still felt uncomfortable. I settled in, took a shower, and then went outside to try to see if anyone was around. The place was very quiet. I hadn't brought any food with me, so I had to go find the nearest grocery store. The map on my phone said that the nearest store was miles away. I tried to order a ride on Uber, but none were available. We were too far out. Without knowing what else to do, I messaged Ryan again, asking where I could go for food. He didn't respond. Thankfully, I had a single bag of M&Ms in my backpack, so I ate those. Still hungry, I got into bed and took a nap. I woke back up around sunset. I could hear noises outside. Excited, I realized that more people had checked in. Maybe they could give me a ride back to the city where I could find a real hotel. I grabbed my room key and headed out. When I walked into the common room, I saw a huge group of people inside. They were all standing in the center of the room, whispering to each other. They seemed to be about my age. They were dressed all in black, and I didn't see any luggage with them. Honestly, they looked like a cult. I ignored my nervousness and stepped closer. All at once, they turned to look at me. None of them smiled. Hi, I said. The whole group stared at me, not moving. Then they formed a huge huddle and started whispering again, obviously about me. The tallest man in the group left the others and started walking toward me. Either he was their leader, or they just appointed him to deal with me. He smiled and extended his hand. When we shook, his skin felt deathly cold. "I'm Aquarius," he said. "Jill," I told him, even though I hated to give this creep any personal information. He walked around me, examining me. He stopped right behind me and placed his hand on my shoulders. I was too afraid to move. "Tell me your birthday." "August 6th. The words just came out. He instantly let go of my shoulders, but he still stayed behind me. I was facing the rest of the group. When I said my birth date, all of them gasped, like I just admitted to a crime. Aquarius grabbed the tops of my arms, holding me in place. His fingers dug into my skin. "I'm sorry, but you're a fire sign. We have no use for you." All at once, the rest of them started walking toward me. I had no idea what they were going to do to me, but I wasn't going to wait and find out. I slammed my heel into Aquarius's shin. He loosened his grip on me, and I twisted free. I could feel hands grab at the back of my shirt, but I was too fast. I ran out of the building and into the main courtyard. I raced to the front with no plan except to get as far away from these psychos as possible. I was almost at the gate when I saw something hidden in the bushes. I slowed down a little bit to see what it was. There, half buried in the ground, was Ryan, the Airbnb host. I recognized him from his photo, but in the photo, his head wasn't cratered in by some blunt object. I almost threw up, but I had to keep going. I made it to the gate just as the strange people reached me. They grabbed my arms, but I was able to squeeze through the half-open gate. Then I pulled it shut and jammed a stick between the bars so they couldn't open it. There was just empty space in front of me, with one lonely highway running from left to right. I didn't remember which direction my Uber had come from, so I randomly picked the left and kept running. For a while, the people in black followed me, but once I got far enough away, they all turned back. Maybe they were going to go for their cars. I kept running until I got to a private house. I'm not sure how far away it was. No one was home, so I hid in their well house and called 911. After what I told the police, they sent a bunch of cops to the Airbnb. I met one of the police cars on the road. An officer guided me to her car and took me back to the station. I didn't find out until later that night what had happened. The strange group had booked all the rooms on the property for some sort of gathering. I don't know what brand of witchcraft or Satanism they were practicing, but they killed all the people on the premises right before I got there, including Ryan. They thought they were alone to do their ritual, but no one told them that Ryan's room was rented out to me. That's why they tried to get rid of me, too. When the police arrived, every one of them was gone. They left some of their clothes and ritualistic objects behind, but they drove off before anyone could find them. I ended up checking into a hotel on the exact opposite side of town. I stayed in Albuquerque for the month, like I'd planned, but I kept having nightmares. I still do.
My name is Tanya, and I'm an elementary school teacher. For the last year, I've worked at a pretty dysfunctional charter school. It was run by a woman named Janice. She started the school just before the pandemic, and most of the staff were her family members. I was the only non-relative working for her, and she treated me like garbage. Because all the other teachers were in her family, they did whatever she wanted. But because I'd been a public school teacher for most of my adult life, I knew that a lot of her decisions were just wrong. I pushed back against her a lot, but always because I wanted the best for our students. When Janice announced a school field trip to Grapevine Canyon, I was surprised that she chose me as one of the chaperones. I agreed to go, of course. I love taking students on field trips, especially if they got to see nature. The bus arrived at the canyon, and I was in charge of half the students while Janice was in charge of the rest. Most of the students in her group were related to her. It was a really fun trip. We got to see some ancient Native American petroglyphs, plus some really cool rock formations. The kids seemed to really enjoy it. As we made it back to the bus, Janice's students all came up to me. "Miss Tanya," one of them said, "we can't find Miss Janice." It was Parker, one of Janice's nephews, and he sounded really nervous. I told all of the kids to wait on the bus while I went back into the canyon to look for her. I was very annoyed. Janice had broken the one rule of field trips. She'd left her students behind and gotten lost. I looked everywhere for her, but I couldn't find her. I headed back to the bus, hoping that she'd found her way back, but the bus was gone. They'd left without me. I pulled out my phone to call for help, but I didn't have any reception. In a situation like this, I knew the best thing to do was stay put and wait for the bus to come back. It didn't. I was so angry, but I was starting to get nervous too. Eventually, I saw a white van drive toward me. A man was in the driver's seat. I'd never seen him before. He parked in front of me and asked what I was doing here alone. I explained that my school had left me here, and he scolded me for wandering off by myself. I wasn't in the mood for a lecture, especially because this was Janice's fault, not mine. So I just stood there and listened to him go off. But as he was talking, I noticed that his tone of voice sounded a lot like Janice's. When I looked into his steely blue eyes, I noticed that they looked a lot like Janice's eyes. I wasn't certain, but I had a strong feeling that he was one of Janice's relatives too. When he was done lecturing me, he told me to hop in so he could drive me back to town. I didn't trust him, so I asked one question. "Where are you from?" He looked at me, confused, and said, "New Jersey, why?" Janice was from New Jersey. That was all the proof I needed. This guy was definitely her relative, which meant that there was something fishy going on. As a teacher, I always came prepared. Because we were out in the wild, I brought pepper spray with me. I got close to his open window and sprayed him right in the face. He screamed out in pain, distracting him long enough for me to reach in and pull his keys out of the ignition. I demanded to know what was going on. He wouldn't answer, so I sprayed him again. As he desperately wiped his face, he told me that he was Janice's brother. Their whole family wanted to get rid of me, so he was going to take me somewhere deep in the desert, kill me, and then hide my body so that everyone thought I'd gotten lost in the canyon. At least that's what I think he said. He was really struggling to talk through all the pain. I opened the door, pulled him out of the van, and shoved him onto the gravel. Then I hopped in, stuck in the keys, and drove off. When I got back into town, I drove straight to the police station. I saw the school bus parked outside. All the kids were gone, but the driver was still there. He was Janice's cousin. I snuck past, making sure he didn't see me, and then I walked into the waiting room. All the students were sitting in the lobby. When they saw me, they jumped out of their seats and gave me a big group hug. I asked what was going on, and they said that Miss Janice was talking to the police about my disappearance. They pointed toward a door behind them. I told the kids to sit back down and stay quiet. Because I'm a good teacher, they did what I said. I reached the door, which was open just a crack. I could hear the conversation inside. Janice was telling the police how I had left my students behind to wander around the canyon, and I'd disappeared. Parker, Janice's little nephew, was there too. He agreed with her story. She'd obviously told him what to say. The policeman said he'd sent out his men to start searching for me. That's when I pushed open the door and walked inside. "No need," I told the policeman. "I'm safe, but you might need to send someone down there to help Janice's brother. He tried to kidnap me, so I pepper sprayed him and left him there." Janice and Parker stared at me, horrified. The charter school closed down after that, and I went back to teaching at a public school. Public schools have a lot of problems too, but nothing compares to my time at that charter school. Janice and most of her family are in jail now. It's what they deserve.